I am beyond disturbed, Joe. You know, I was a law clerk to Justice Blackmun on the United States Supreme Court when this kind of behavior would have been unimaginable. You wouldn't have read about it in a book of fiction. And now this kind of conduct is taking down the Supreme Court. It's
nobody would have believed it if you'd put it in a book of fiction.
No one would have believed it. And Justice Alito should not sit on any of these cases involving Donald Trump. He ought to recuse himself. And here is the challenge to Chief Justice Roberts. The United States Supreme Court's credibility is plummeting.
All-time low.
Completely.
Lower than perhaps even the United States Congress, and that's saying something. And it is due to the Supreme Court's own self-inflicted wounds. Alito and Thomas directly involved in the January 6th insurrection. Now they're going to sit on cases involving pivotal legal questions. Absolutely unthinkable. And I think that Chief Justice Roberts has to take leadership of this court. He has to tell these two justices that they have no business sitting on the court. It will still be able to decide the cases, but not with Justices Alito and Thomas, because by virtue of flying that flag upside down, whether it was his wife or not, it's his home. And Justice Thomas, through his wife Ginny, being involved in helping to organize the insurrection, both have a very direct interest here.
You know, Mike, I was talking before growing up in a very conservative area with federal judges who, sure, were very conservative. But I knew a few of them fairly well. You could not get them to talk about politics in the privacy of their own home. There was a line. They felt like they had a duty. They believed it was a sacred duty not to be involved in politics. And here you have a court run by Chief Justice John Roberts, an institutionalist, a man who I think may be one of the last institutionalists in the Supreme Court, but an institutionalist who has seen ethics problems come up regarding payments to justices, who's seeing just the most disturbing politicalization through Ginny Thomas and now this. He's got to do something. He's got to make a statement. I believe the American court system separates us from other countries. It is usually the leveling wind, even if we disagree with some decisions from time to time. And yet things just keep getting worse. Their approval rating keeps getting lower. Soon, they're going to lose respect by the overwhelming majority of Americans. And then a tyrannical president can just run over them and just ignore their rulings like Andrew Jackson did.
Well, Joe, you served in the House of Representatives. Senator Blumenthal serves in the United States Senate. There is accountability in both bodies to a certain extent. There are some rogues. People get away with things. There's no doubt about that. But there's accountability. There is no accountability on the United States Supreme Court. None. And I think you're correct. I mean, Justice Roberts, people who know him, who I know, indicate that he's a solid guy, a responsible guy, and has his eye on his legacy. His legacy is going to be ruined by the behavior of people like Justice Alito. And Susan Glasser, on the point of the Supreme Court having no accountability, on the point of the Supreme Court about to rule on presidential immunity, I mean, what impact do you think internally in Washington, among the collective powers, in the Senate, in the House, in the presidency, what is their view of the Supreme Court's function today and the Supreme Court's behavior today?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is another story about lack of accountability in our institutions. It's part of the overall crisis of faith that Americans have in all of our political institutions right now. I think when you look at the questions surrounding Donald Trump for 8 years, many people looked at Trump's behavior, the fact that he was able to get away with so many things for so long, and saw an incredible lack of accountability. Well, he's in a courtroom Right now, the question is who polices the Supreme Court. I'm curious to hear from Senator Blumenthal whether there's any prospect of any legislation ever coming through that says that the Supreme Court needs to be more accountable. There's a real question whether the court even enforces its own rules. As that very important New York Times story points out, the Supreme Court actually warns its employees regularly against any displays that could be interpreted in a partisan manner, in a political manner. When the Times asked the court spokesperson, do these rules apply to the justices, they did not receive an answer. And to me, that speaks to an institution without any accountability. It's really an important piece of reporting, and it's very upsetting.
So, Senator, this comes at a moment where Americans' faith in the courts have really declined per polling, that the court is perceived as far more political than ever before. It comes at also a fraught moment for the nation. We're in an election year. One of the leading candidates is currently on trial. There's just sort of a sense of real unrest and tumult. And now we have this, where I think more and more Americans might feel like, well, this is, in fact, rigged. The gig is this is not going to be done, in a fair and done way with the Constitution in mind. How worried are you about where this nation's heading right now, as things are only going to grow tenser between now and November?
I couldn't be more worried. And here's the reason. It goes to Michael's point. The judicial system has no armies. It has no police force. Its orders are obeyed because of its credibility, because people trust it. And it has squandered that trust. The ones who have squandered it most irresponsibly are the highest court justices. And we've worked for a code of ethics, been rejected by Republicans. We've worked for an inspector general. My proposal is that the judicial branch have an inspector general, just like every other agency of government. The Supreme Court has no code of ethics, uniquely among the branches of government. So I think it is a moment of reckoning for our democracy in a very real sense because of the trust that has been lost in our judiciary. And I think we have a bipartisan obligation. We ought to come together as Republicans and Democrats, because this issue is bigger than either party and any of us individually.
Well, and unfortunately, again, at a time when faith in the Supreme Court is so low, you look and you have a Supreme Court that is slow walking the January 6th case. The D.C. Circuit, I got to say, I'm rarely shocked by what comes out from the Supreme Court. Yeah. And I wasn't even shocked with Dobbs. It's like, wait, these people have said since they were in law school, they believe it's a state's issue. So don't be shocked when people have been saying. But I will tell you, I was shocked by the immunity decision. I thought the D.C. Circuit's extraordinary decision would be immediately affirmed. Or that
court wouldn't take the case.
Court wouldn't take the case. Court wouldn't take the case. So they're slow walking the January 6th case, the Supreme Court. You look what's happening with the stolen nuke secrets case, the stolen war plans case. You look at that. There's a judge in South Florida that was excoriated by the most conservative circuit court in America for being just biased. And the mistakes that she's making now regarding jury instructions, we won't even get into it. It is laughable. You would get an F in law school.
It's the judge they got.
But it's the judge they got. I get it. I'm just talking about, you add those two things, and it looks like people are doing things for Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. You look at what Thomas has been doing ethically. You look at what Ginny Thomas was doing regarding January 6th. Now you look at what Alito's doing with a flag hung upside down. And I will say it, right after Dobbs, you had Amy Coney Barrett, who I will say, even though I disagree with her in a lot of things, I've respected her the best for going to a Federalist Society dinner and making light of opposition after Dobbs, making light of that. I'm telling you, this is, if people want to know, and I know the senator will be the same way, people who grew up around federal judges are seeing this behavior from the top justices in the land, and it's like they're from another planet. Right. Just like I don't recognize my party, I do not recognize this type of behavior from any federal judge.
I think, Joe, you and I have over the years talked about this, and, you used to be able to talk about Harry Blackmun, appointed by Richard Nixon, ends up authoring the opinion in Roe v. Wade. John Roberts, supposedly a conservative justice, if he was behaving like a partisan, surprises everybody, comes out and affirms the Affordable Care Act, keeps it on the books. That's the tradition that we had for a long time, which was not that the justices didn't have ideological predispositions, but that they routinely would do things that surprise people, so that you could never predict what would happen on a big historic case, because it turned out that a supposedly liberal justice ended up being conservative, or a conservative justice ended up being liberal.
By the way, John Roberts of the Affordable Care Act famously said, don't ask us to do it the court, but you can do it the ballot box next year.
And I think it's, we're at the end now of 25 years where with Bush v. Gore, and people were stunned that to see this court appearing to act in such a nakedly partisan way. And it has been 25 years of erosion, and erosion on the basis of these predictable outcomes on the basis of who you were appointed by. I think, all of these displays, the Ginny Thomas case, the go to the Federalist Society, the hanging of the flag upside down, you might be able to, in some world, dismiss all of it as symbolic outside the court action if it weren't for the fact, the thing you just said, which is the most crucial thing. There is nothing more important than the notion that a president who's been indicted for having been a participant in and having led an insurrection against the United States government, that case be heard before this election, so that the former president, Donald Trump, would have legal and political accountability, so voters would know whether this man was guilty of having committed a crime of that nature. And there is no conceivable world in which we are really going to say that, whether you're conservative or liberal, that the president of the United States is beyond the reach of the law, is immune from any prosecution for anything he does when he's in office. And yet, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a wholly predictable and partisan way, decided to basically say, as you said, slow walk, I would say, an outrageous decision not to seriously just pass on this case. Given what the appeals court had done, there was only one right answer, which was, there is no issue here. There is no issue here other than the partisan issue. And now they are going to almost certainly guarantee that we will not have a verdict in that case before voters go to the polls in November. It's a shocking, substantive outcome, not a symbolic thing. I mean, I'm not downplaying the hanging of the flag upside down. That's the leading indicator. That's what's reflective of is this total casting aside of any attempt or pretense of being nonpartisan. It is just, we are doing what our, in this case, conservative ideology tells us to do, and we're working for Donald Trump.
And it's really a moment of reckoning for the Chief Justice, because it is an unaccountable institution appointed for life, but the Chief Justice has an opportunity. He has an obligation to take action. Congress has an obligation to take action. There are remedies like a code of conduct and inspector general that can be imposed here, but it is really up to the Chief Justice most immediately to act.